Hello, hello, hello. Black Bean Simpson here. How's everyone doing? Well, it is kind of nighttime. How's everybody doing tonight? Happy New Year's. Hope you all had a good New Year's Eve. Mine was good. And several people come over. Made some, made a couple cakes, really patriotic cakes. One was like for New Year's itself, and the other one was for a friend's birthday. Yeah, their birthday was literally on New Year's Eve. All right, so this is an update essentially on the Jordan Peterson and um, them leaving Patreon. I got a couple parts that I'm just gonna highlight on throughout the video. Dave Rubin, I guess, claims that Patreon is like a major front line for his revenue. So for him to decide to leave like they are, and they decided to leave. They're stating January. I think they said January 15th. Yeah, January 15th. 2 weeks here. They'll be leaving the platform. They'll be deplatforming themselves from Patreon. Now this is not what they want to do, but they know this is what's necessary to make a statement happen. You know, and rather than catching them surprise, why not do this to themselves, which really forces them to really get their other platform going. Now, some of the problems is like payments and stuff, which is well, I'm going to highlight a couple of those things. Why those are huge problems right now for freedom of speech on the internet. Essentially anywhere in the world, but especially right now in America, where it's freedom of speech reigns. It's literally the First Amendment, and we're having problems with companies thinking that they can decide on what is allowed and what is not allowed because they're not the government. Well, that's the problem, and that's the whole purpose of government is to protect our rights from corruption like that, from powers to be that are so big and just overcompassing that they can just think that they can control people's life. That is totalitarian stuff. That is uh, get into like dystopian like type of societies. It's crazy. And Jordan Peterson, he's losing out big too because by him leaving Patreon, I guess a lot of the money that he was collecting through Patreon was going to a education revenue, or I'm sorry, an education, an education website or something that he wanted to do happening here. Like right now, fake news. Um, that word, it's perfect, but at the same time, it's misrepresenting essentially what it is. These people are putting out manipulative information. Like so, when people like Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson are leaving a platform, people write about them and negative connotations. Like rather than saying, well, they're leaving because they're standing up and making a point because people are being deplatformed from all sides. They say hateful, bigoted, blah blah blah. People are leaving because they're losing revenue because of new policy changes. It's like what the fuck? That's not at all what these people said or stated or did anything. So here, let's
This is not something we wanted to do. I know we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things in this recording, but that New York Times article that came out, the implication was, oh, we're doing this for money. It's like we're taking a major hit right now and opening ourselves up to all sorts of risks. So I'm going ahead and doing that because I believe we can do something better. We've got to figure out exactly what that is, and that's what we're working on.
But so we can say two things. I mean, I'd also like to thank the Patreon people for what they did in the past because they provided me with a tremendous amount of, or the ability, the opportunity to generate a tremendous amount of financial support at a time I really needed it. And so
if it wasn't for enlightened people who are for the truth and honesty, people like Jordan Peterson wouldn't be able to continue to do this or defend himself. You know, that's another thing is like these people want to sit there and say, well, it's all about money, right? And it's like, well, if that was the case, Jordan Peterson would have done what he did. The guy was making great money as a professor up in Canada. I mean, he was probably making over $100,000 a year. So he literally in 10 years could have made over $1 million sitting back and repeating the same bull crap that he was repeating in the past before that, or what other professors have been saying to continue to not be disruptive to the status quo. It's amazing how many people out there are really wanting to change the world for the better rather than again remove the essentially I'd say about 300-400 years of struggle to bring in something that has never been done in human history, like the freedoms that we have to freely express those rights that you do have by just being born. You have those rights, but see, there's forces out there that want to limit those, that want to hinder your rights as a human being. Right now, we're seeing that with simply freedom of speech, by them calling it whatever they deem they don't like as hate speech, is the division of what speech is. It's like when someone goes, I don't like that person because of their shoes or because of their attitude or because of their past or whatever. Suddenly you're a racist because of their skin color. Though that had nothing to do with it, nor you were attacking the group in total or who that person comes from. You were simply just stating what you can observe or what you have gone through dealing with that person. And that's not racism. There's no such thing as racism, but it's a set of anger or hatred that you have towards someone, and somehow that's being translated into this word racism that creates division. You know, it's all about the dividing right now, and that's what the media is trying to do, and we need to be aware of that. Um, I want to start right here.
Let's think this through. So the New York Times last week wrote an article about the credit card's complicity in loaning money to that terrible tiny minority of people who engaged in mass shootings, right? Stating that it was the responsibility of the credit card companies to monitor and potentially prevent that activity. It's like, okay, so what's this? What's the idea here? The idea is that the companies to whom we have entrusted our monetary system, in large parts, that would be the credit card companies, now get to review our spending patterns to determine if what we purchase is in accordance with what they regard as morally acceptable. Okay, and we think that's a good idea. That's where we're headed. And Mastercard and Visa and PayPal are already starting to block people. Like Mastercard was instrumental in blocking Spencer.
Robert Spencer, right? It's Robert Spencer, not Richard Spencer.
Yes, it's its best-selling author and the guy who runs Jihad Watch. Mastercard required Patreon to deplatform him.
And just to be very clear, they sent out a tweet, which everyone can find. I'm shocked that they haven't deleted it yet, where they said that they used this word, which I think is the key to the whole thing. They said that they unfortunately had to delete his Patreon because of MasterCard. So what are they actually saying there? Is Patreon saying, oh, we didn't want to delete your page, but MasterCard forced our hand? I mean, that is some deeply scary stuff.
Yeah, well, and we have to talk about hate speech because, I think the whole concept of, look, obviously there is, people can be very nasty when they communicate.
Problems that freedom of speech is facing. It's not the cry wolves. It's not essentially Patreon or Facebook. It's the money lenders. It's the money loaners. It's the bankers. It's the people who control wealth itself. Those people are having a power that that once again is affecting everybody's freedoms in a way that is very little understood, sadly, right now. To the way how it's going to influence the future where it comes with the internet, unless something's done about it. That's why some people are talking about like an internet bill of rights type of deal. I really don't know how that would look, but we definitely need to start protecting one of the most important inventions ever mankind has ever invented, which is the internet. I mean, this is a tool that has never existed, not even come close to ever existing, and it fundamentally has changed society in the last, I'd say about, well, it's been being used since what, the early like 50s or something like that, or even before that, but really like steadily since like the 50s. So yeah, since the 80s and 90s, it's just fundamentally has really improved the living habits and how we deal with communication. So it's like when you got people who have power, like Mastercard companies and stuff, it just, yeah. So I'm gonna highlight here.
Is the lack of imagination on the part of the people who are engaging in censorship of what they regard as hate speech. Like there's an old military adage, which is that if you invent a weapon, it will be used by your enemy within 15 years. Okay, so what makes the people on the left, because they're the ones who are doing this, what, as you can clearly see in the Change the Terms website, what makes them so sure that exactly the same tactics won't be used against them, like at the drop of a hat? Once.
Yeah, and that is another interesting point of how these people just overlook that. How do you overlook the fact that if these weapons, these ideas, these methods, these approaches have been used against their enemies, and then once their enemies have learned a new tactic, their enemies that they've been fighting against will learn that and use it against them. It's just constantly been like that. It's like you think that people would open a history book and actually educate themselves rather than continue to repeat other people's uh, words constantly. I mean, I get it. I get that you're not going to have complete, full ideas on your own all the time. I get that, and I get sometimes it's just easier to accept what other people have finally have researched and studied because you're not going to do that and then repeat what they have found. That's a lot easier. But it is impressing that of all the supposedly government education that we've gotten, that you would think that you would have at least the ability to have like deductive reasoning or even inductive reasoning, just reasoning in itself. But it's like they have anti-reasoning. It's some really impressive indoctrination, I gotta say. It's just there's a bunch of layers to it that could be talked about another time, but it's definitely interesting. Uh, I want to go on here, continue on with the Mastercard parts.
Of weeks thinking about it is the fact that the credit card companies are now taking it upon themselves to potentially police the activities of their users. It's like, my God, is that really? I just can't believe that any sensible person would think that through and then want to live in a society where your spending habits are being monitored by the company that basically produces your money. Jesus, yeah, well, I can't think of anything more totalitarian than that.
To loosely quote our friend Eric Weinstein, should Republicans be allowed to use roads? That's sort of where we're headed here.
And that's right. We're definitely heading down that road where instead of it says white only fountain, it's gonna say only liberals fountain. we already have it with the spaces. The safe spaces exactly are that. Are those safe spaces made for conservatives to talk? Can a group of conservatives go into those safe spaces while liberals are sitting there crying and start talking and debating on what they would like to do politically or just in life in general, or just talk about what they believe or would like to do? That's the thing. Like, people just don't want to truly think about what their actions are and the consequences from those actions. Yeah, I get it's a nice idea to have safe spaces for people. I get that. I get that. But in reality, it's nice though people can just deal with life rather than have to run to some safe space. Are still need to come to an understanding that the freedoms that we have been born into, are not because of a simply at the whim of a gust of wind. It was because hundreds and thousands of people sacrificed themselves essentially to have built um, uh, a mound of essentially freedoms. And I say a mound because it has been essentially, they've been digging. You dig for these freedoms essentially, and that's what they did. And now we have this mound that they're suddenly starting to dig from, and it's like, and they're like taking this mound and filling the hole back up, and it's like, no, we need this dirt, a mound, a mound of dirt that is called our freedom. It's giving us that base to build on. That mound is our platform. That is our primitive rock, essentially. So I'm going to leave off right here.
Think that, and maybe this will be the defining idea of 2019, is that I think we're basically at the point where people have to decide what sort of internet they want.
Yeah.
And it's not only what sort of internet, it's really what sort of freedom do you want in a digital world? And either...
Or do you want any?
Or do you want any? And maybe you don't, or you don't want to think about it, and you just want to play Fortnite and watch porn and never think it through. But
yeah, assuming that you'll be allowed to watch porn.
Right. So now you really
or play Fortnite for that matter.
Right. So
what makes you think that games of violence should be allowed? What makes you think that credit card companies should allow you to use their funds to purchase first-person shooter games, for example, or any game where anyone is killed?
No, you're totally right. That sounds completely dystopian, and yet it seems like that would just be the next encroachment that we would see here. So the point at the end of this is, I think everyone for 2019, since it's the first day of the year, it's like, you have to think about what type of internet do you want? What type of ability to communicate with other people do you want? And if you want something that's a little better than what we've got right now, we better stand up quick, because this window, we know it's closing slowly, but we never know when it's going to really slap shut quick. So we're working on it, and I think people are ready to stand up with us. I really do.
We might all.
So, what kind of internet do you want from here on? Do you want a dictatorial internet? Do you want a Soviet Union like internet? Would you want a North Korea like internet? What kind of internet would you like? Would you like a internet based purely on freedoms? Would you like an internet based purely on intellectualism, creativity, progressive towards arts? Like, what do people want? I mean, right now we're having people who have control, and they're being forced by few, and because these people have control, ultimately gives them the arbitrary power of deciding on what people are allowed to essentially do, hear, say, what they're allowed to present to the world. Gatekeepers they are. They feel like they are the gatekeepers of what is said and done and who gets to see it and how it's delivered. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe. If you didn't like this podcast, please still like and subscribe. Happy New Year's. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.